Brandon asks, how do we know if SEO is working? That's a great question, Brandon. One of the things we've talked about here is I view it as a red flag if any agency or company were to come to you and say, hey, within a certain number of days, months, whatever, we're going to put you at the top of page one. Without knowing your particular market or the particular area you're trying to service or the particular product or category you're trying to service, it's almost impossible to guarantee how quickly you're going to go up the rankings and get to the top of page one. It's just no reputable company typically is going to guarantee those things, because the reason is this is not happening in a static environment. The other companies that you might view as competitors also may be paying an agency that's trying to do things for their SEO and things like that. So it's impossible to know that as you're making changes, they can be making changes as well, and how all those things are going to play out in the Google algorithm as to how quickly you elevate. Now, to answer your question, how do you know if it's working? One of the ways I look at is the best way to know if something's working is before you start any SEO, before you do anything, pick out 10 keywords / key phrases that you want to rank for, and then go into what's called an incognito browser. And I'm not going to go into how to get into an incognito browser. You could do it on Safari. You could do it on Chrome. Just Google how to open an incognito browser. What that is a browser that's going to be stripped of any cache or history or anything like that, cookies, so that when you're doing the search, it's truly a raw search. It's not pulling from any previous searches of pages you've looked at. So open up an incognito browser and search these 10 keywords or key phrases and annotate where you come up, whether that's the middle of page one, whether that's the bottom of page two, wherever it is, the good, the bad, and the ugly, annotate where you come up on specific searches, and that's before you do any SEO. Now, 1 month into a company working on your SEO or you're working on your SEO, go in, open up another incognito browser, and search those same 10 keywords or key phrases and see where you come up and track. Now, what you should start to see if you're making an effort to improve your SEO in those particular areas is you should start to see an improvement. So let's say you showed up on the middle of page two. Maybe now you're showing up more towards the top of page two, or maybe you moved up 2 spots. Maybe you moved from the middle of page two to more towards the top third of page two. Maybe you moved from the top of page two to the bottom of page one. So what you're looking for when you're trying to measure whether the SEO efforts that you're doing are working or whether you're seeing improvements on those keywords and key phrases that you're trying to come up for. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't go to the top of page one, depending on your particular market or the competition. It doesn't mean you will, though. But what you're looking for is improvement. Again, if you're putting in effort, what you want to see is that you're seeing your SEO be improved over time. Again, I'm not saying that, by doing the right things, you won't go to the top of page one in 30, 60, 90, 6 months, whatever. It just is not, in my mind, when a company guarantees that, it's almost impossible to guarantee that. The other thing I would be doing with regard to SEO is tracking where you're coming up in the Google Maps and the localized Google listings where you see the pin and they have the company's listing. That's going to be derived more from what you're doing on your Google business page and what's happening there. And I feel like that Google business page is almost like a second half of your website. So as much as you're going to optimize your website, you want to be thinking of optimizing that page as well, because that's going to determine where you're coming up in those localized listings. So I would be tracking that as well, not just where you come up in the organic search, but where you come up in the local listings as well. And ideally, you want to see both of those moving in the positive direction. In an ideal situation, you get to the point where you may have a top of page one organic result, and you may have a very top listing in the Google local results in the map pack in those areas as well. So you actually have 2 listings on the top of the page, and that would be ideal. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Brandon. You actually said my agency sold me on this exact spiel. Again, what I would do, Brandon, before they really start doing a lot of work, figure out where you're showing up right now, and then figure out where you're showing up within a couple months or things like that, or 30 days. 30 days is usually enough time to hopefully see a little bit of movement and track it. And you should be able to tell whether you're improving or not. One of the negative things that happens when a lot of companies do this is they say you got to give it 6 months to work or whatever. And then what happens at the end of 6 months? They've collected 6 months of your payment. And at the end of 6 months, if you haven't gotten the results you want, you may quit and leave, but they've still collected 6 months of your thing. So what sort of guarantee? Are they going to refund your money in 6 months if you're not at the top of page one? Ask those questions, because again, I'm not saying all agencies, but a lot of agencies use the tactic of it's just a numbers game. If they can get enough people to sign on, even if they don't produce the results at the end of 6 months and people bail out, they've collected a lot of money in the meantime. So just be careful. Make sure, companies that are reputable should be willing to share with you what they're doing, how they're testing, how they're measuring their results, things like that. And I think as long as you're sticking with good, reputable companies, Brandon, you should see an improvement in the results. But again, most companies that are reputable aren't going to guarantee you how quickly you're going to show up at the top of page one. So